Ubuntu is actually you exist because of others. I am because you are. Without you, I'm nothing. And you are nothing without me.
The ambassador from South Africa, Ambassador Ngonyama. Ambassador Ngonyama, thank you so much for being a part of this podcast.
Thank you so much, Lance, for the opportunity.
Right. Seeing you the other night, we had a big event here at the American Club the other night. It was South African night, right? It was First Friday, and you were there. Now, I did not think much. I thought maybe you were a member or something because you were wearing your national colors.
Yeah.
And it was a T-shirt.
Yeah.
So you said hello like this, and then you said, well, I'm the South African ambassador. And I went, whoa. And then I asked you if you'd come to the podcast, and you said, sure. And
Absolutely.
I was really, really pleased and feel so honored.
No, thank you. Thank you so much.
Ambassador, one of the first questions I ask everyone is, where were you born?
I was born in South Africa in the province called Eastern Cape in South Africa, in an area called then and Utnik, or Port Elizabeth area, which now has been renamed into Nelson Mandela Metropolitan City. So that's where I come from. I was born in that area and brought up in that area.
You have siblings?
I have siblings. We're 10 altogether at home.
Okay.
And right now, many of them passed on, including my parents, of course. Okay. And
where were you ranking in there?
Was number 3.
You're number 3.
I was number 3.
And above you are what, a boy or girl?
It was 2 brothers.
2 brothers.
2 brothers before me. The first one was a dancer. The second one was also a dancer and a sportsman as well. Okay. And myself and the eldest wanted me to be a dancer, but I was too stiff for dancing.
So you mean that was his career, or what he did as a sport?
No, it was just in the sport, yes.
Okay,
because he did it whilst he was at school.
Okay, yes.
And he became, even after he finished his school, he started to do dancing, focusing on that, yeah.
Well, traditional dancing?
No, ballroom dancing.
Oh, ballroom dancing.
Dancing.
So he did this for competition or something?
Competition, yes.
Okay, so below you have 7 more.
7 more, and my brother, and who is no more as well, and the sisters, 3 of them, and another brother, and as well. So we're 5 altogether who are now surviving.
Okay, so there were 4 boys and 6 girls?
No, there were 3 boys.
3 boys?
No, there were three girls. Sorry,
3 girls.
3 girls and 7 guys.
Boys.
Yeah.
So, see, now you grew up, I think apartheid started in South Africa in
1948.
48. And you were born in 52.
1952.
So that means you had about 5 years before, was that about 5 years? Would that be about right?
Yeah,
or 4 years?
Yeah.
4 years before, but it was becoming really strong.
Yeah.
They were starting to get controls.
That was actually the prime time.
I was thinking in 52.
It was the prime time because those are the times when laws of oppression were actually being introduced. Like, for instance, the Land Act and the laws relating to the Group Areas Act, and meaning that African people and black people in general cannot open business or even stay in the urban areas or the city centers of the country. They were actually discriminated against, and therefore they had to stay in what was referred to at the time as townships. And so those were the times, and also at the time when the land was actually disposition of land, and from people were taken away from their land, and land was taken over and possessed by white people and business people.
When did this become evident to you? Because you were born in 52, so it was in effect, but when did you realize that it wasn't fair?
Well, when you grow, and
how old were you, maybe?
And when you grow, you think that everything is just normal.
Right.
And so at that time, I was still very young. But as you grow and you begin to experience and you listen, because your parents begin to talk, and about unfairness, about discrimination. Then you listen, what is happening here?
But how old were you when you really started to think, this isn't right? Because I remember my parents, when white people would come to our homes to sell vacuum cleaners or whatever, I remember they would say, they would call the person a sob, S-O-B. And what's sob? And they never told me what that meant. And I didn't know what they were talking about. And I was much older before I realized what they were saying. So how old were you when it started to hit you?
I think I must have been plus or minus 12 years old, somewhere there. And then I started to realize, okay, and even as we're playing, then as you grow, you begin to see and listen and see the codes used. And people talking about, as they are walking in the street, you see some people, elderly people, greeting themselves like this, and with the clenched and the fist and the thumb like this. Then even my parents, I would actually see them doing that. And in the afternoon, maybe on Sundays, you see them gradually moving very slowly to the hall, and after church. Then that's where apparently meetings were held and everything, and so many things were being debated and discussed about how to mobilize and for the new organization and the African National Congress at the time, which is ANC.
And that was established when?
No, the ANC was established in 1912.
That's what I thought. That's been there for a long
time. It was
time.
established in 1912, so within the townships, it was starting to be introduced, and it did not come and become strong everywhere. It moved on. It started even in the church, because it came out of the Ethiopian church, and in South Africa, Ethiopianism. And that's another very interesting part of our history. And where does Ethiopianism come from? It's because Ethiopia was actually respected as a country that was never colonized.
Never colonized Ethiopia.
Never colonized. So there was that spirit. And then it started in the church. When the churches started to say that, and we can't be taking the little monies that we have and actually contribute in the building of the churches owned predominantly by white people. And so some ministers and guys like the late Duane, Reverend Duane, and Tile, and many others, and they started to shape up their own churches. And now the Ethiopianism church.
Right. This sign, the sign with the fist and the thumb up, was that the sign, we're going to have a meeting tonight?
No, this sign is greeting people. And as you greet, this finger has to be like this, meaning it must come back, just like this. It must come back.
Our land?
Our land, property, our country, our continent.
Our continent.
Africa must come back. And you walk and you don't realize what is happening. Then you just see the old man greeting another old man. He's actually motivating and recharging, mobilizing for the African and come back and come back.
How old were you when it really struck you? Like I remember in my time, there was a time when I really saw the difference. I was in a school event and I went to a white school, and their high school looked like a college compared to my school. The cars they drove, the books they had, that's the first time I felt poor. I thought we were okay until I saw that.
Yes.
And just the looks on their face, they looked like what I'd always seen on television, because you never saw black people on TV when we were young. In America, you didn't see them. You always saw white people. You saw Father Knows Best. You never saw that. So when was it when you thought, this is not right?
Well, I must have been plus or minus 15 years old at the time, and I was in the higher primary, and higher primary built and shabbily compared to the white institutions and colleges and high schools. And within our area we had a school called Brandwach and another one called Muir College. And as you would actually be going to town or even going to hospital, and you see the young boys and girls coming out of the school, you see the beautiful uniforms, you look at the school, And you look and you say, but what is happening? Why is it that my school can't be like this? And you begin to say, one day I will study in that school. And you can't put together as to exactly the system itself.
Your parents never sat you down and told you, look, we're under apartheid, it's not fair, because they knew clearly what was happening.
Oh, definitely they knew, and they would educate us in many ways. They actually educate you differently. They don't actually tell you 100%. They give you values.
Such as?
Lance.
Give me some idea.
They give you values to say that unity, it is important that you care for your brother and you care for others. And you don't exist for yourself. You exist together with others. And they continue to drum this. And they say you must have Ubuntu. Ubuntu is actually you exist because of others. I am because you are. Without you, I'm nothing. And you are nothing without me. They would start in that way. And then even in the way we sit and eat at home, you are never given your plate and individually. You are given one big dish and food there. Each and everyone is having a spoon. You learn to eat together. So you are shaped up in that kind of way, and then you begin to understand that there's Ubuntu.
Is that Zulu?
It is Nguni.
Nguni, okay.
Nguni is a combination of Zulu, Xhosa, and Ndebele and others.
Okay.
Yeah, even in other languages and the African languages like Sotho and so on.
They say the same.
And Ubuntu, yeah. It's the same. Whether you go to Kenya, you go everywhere, they have that theme. It's a philosophy. It's a very strong adage for Africans. That's why Africans generally, when they look at a child, it's your child. Pure. Any child is your child. And we grew up in that kind of environment, and so you would actually feel that even if you walk around with you're studying to be smart and girlfriend and so on, but when you look at the parents, when you see the elderly people, you must separate immediately. The one will be there and you're walking here and you begin to talk because they're giving respect to elderly people, because every child is my child and every parent is your parent. I am because you are Ubuntu. And therefore you can't pass on somebody that is struggling and you have maybe a loaf of bread and you are sitting there eating in your home and next door there's nothing. And Ubuntu, it's not humanity. It's not humaneness.
Ambassador, listening to that, and I've lived in Japan for 50 years now.
Yes.
How do you find the parallels between the way you grew up and Ubuntu, in the Japanese society? What do you see that's similar? Or
there's very much similarity.
How? How do you see it?
The way I look at it, I mean, the Japanese people generally are respecting. They are respecting, and you can't just do things because you feel it's your right to talk in the lift. It's my right to do this, it's my right to do that. It's different generally from the Western way of doing things. There's a bit of collectivity here in Japan, and I think it's coming from their own culture of samurais and so on and so forth. And they continue in that way. And so there is definitely similarities. And that's what myself I've seen. And when I came here, that definitely there are similarities between our African way and the Japanese way.
Did you find it easy for yourself, because you were at Spain prior to this, in Spain.
Yes.
Spain was a different story for you. How was Spain compared to here?
Well, Spain is a typical Western country. There's life, social life generally. People are enjoying life, and football, everything, and style, everything. When you come here, you see people walking in the streets wearing black pants and a white shirt, the majority of them with a saturated back, and you say to yourself, hey, what's happening? Is this a uniform that is supposed to be put on by people when they go to work? And until after some time, it's formal. People are just formal. They are very serious. They are focused in their work. And different from a country like Spain or maybe London or so on. So that's the difference. That's what I actually picked up when I came here. And the silence. Lance, the silence in the streets. People are just walking, keeping quiet. You don't find people like, well, in my country, in South Africa, when, hey, how are you? Hey, how was the match yesterday? The Kaizer Chiefs. Hey, the Springboks played this way and that way. Oh man, Pollard was very, very good. Now I'm talking about players, rugby players.
Right.
Talking about even the current World Cup. In South Africa, people will be singing in the streets and what have you. But here,
you'd never know.
Order.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, order. Totally different way of life. And, well, in my country, we've taken a lot because it's a hodgepodge. Diversity. And in South Africa, that's what I love about my country. It is that diversity of views, of opinions, and the way of life, the style. And this one is listening to music, and in the street you see somebody dancing and everybody is just standing there. And the person decided to dance for everybody. And to find kids coming together maybe at the waterfront in Cape Town, and during holidays they are busy singing and doing the dance, the traditional dance and so on. And others decide you find one individual is playing his own sex.
That's right.
That's the kind of culture that now I've come to be brought up with.
When you were, after adolescence and you got a little bit older and you started deciding a direction to go in, you understand the disparities between Africans and white South Africans. Mm-hmm. What subjects did you decide to take up? Because you're a career diplomat? Are you a career diplomat?
No.
You're not? You're a businessman?
I'm a politician.
A politician?
Yes, I'm a politician. I've been an activist.
An activist, right, all your life. That's right, because when you left the ANC, you started CORE.
Yes, we started COPE.
Started COPE,
yeah.
Right. And I think I saw something about it. You've learned what most people never learn, that it's always difficult to get in front of people. Mm-hmm. And when the ANC, when you got in that speech and they had the wrong things to say, everybody apologized afterwards because they wouldn't let you speak because you just left the ANC because you said what you felt about it. It had been changing.
Absolutely.
And the structure was breaking down.
Yeah.
And you wanted to stop hugging babies and kissing. You wanted to make sure that everyone understood, I'm real. This is a real gathering. Everything you've said so far. That's interesting. Let me ask you this. So when did you decide to start studying politics?
Well, Lance, I didn't actually decide to study politics. I was more on the science side in my early studies, and I wanted to become an engineer. And when I went to the college, and the engineering department was full, so I did land surveying. I registered for land surveying, and in my second year, I had the first stint of being dealt with by the apartheid system, and at that age I was expelled from the college. And when I was doing my second year in land surveying because of the political activities, and because we had a boycott. It was in 1976, the notorious 1976 in South Africa, when the youth started to rise up against the apartheid and mobilize themselves.
So you were in your 20s then?
I was in the 20s at the time. So then, of course, I was part and parcel of the leading and the group that was actually mobilizing and clandestinely, of course, and organizing students that no, we need to organize ourselves and participate in the national boycott, and that was called and for education, because the main issue and the main gripe at the time was that came up because we have to, during the process of mobilization, you must identify one issue that will actually make sense and to the people, and then they support your call for boycott. So it was about education. It was about Bantu education. Specifically, Bantu education was introduced so that black people are having their own education, which is inferior. And of course, white people are having their own one, which is much more superior. Because as black people, we are actually regarded as grade 3 and third grade. We are ranked as number 3 and in the ranking of the citizens of the country. The first ones would be the white people. Then you have and the other groupings like your coloreds and,
right.
and Indians people. Then you have the Africans at the rock bottom.
Right.
So now, so we have our own education system, which is supposed to be working on us so that we become and hewers of wood and all that, and nothing else, and become better laborers and workers, and who can be able to, when somebody is saying, and give me a plier, I must know what is a plier. Give me a hammer, I must know what is a hammer, and type of thing, to be a better worker, and not to become creative and become truly an intellectual that can think on his own and be able to contribute to the economy of the country by innovating things. So when we realize all this, and also the language of education was enforced, where more of the predominantly English, it was being shifted to the Afrikaans language.
That's what I heard, right.
Then we're battling with English lands. Now all of a sudden we must Afrikaans and mathematics in Afrikaans. You
Only
say
for your school, right?
Mathematics. Now Afrikaans wiskunde. Then you have others, and I think it's rekenkunde, that would be agriculture, right. And geography, yeah. Rekenkunde, yes, something like that. And I still remember the terms, and I may mess up a bit because of the memory. Right. But now I had to, all of us, we had to now starting to be, get these terms and concepts in Afrikaans. When am I going to be able to intensify knowledge on this? Because I must battle first in understanding. I'm carrying my dictionary, the English Afrikaans dictionary. Then later there were a few, maybe African language, English, Afrikaans dictionary. So I'm walking around with this small dictionary wherever I go, and when I get into the class, I must, okay, in Xhosa we call this, and izibalo, which is arithmetic. In Xhosa, then in English it's arithmetic. Then in Afrikaans it's rekenkunde and arithmetic, I think so. I think it's rekenkunde. So you battle in that way.
Now, how old were you when that was installed? How old were you at that time?
I was in the 20s, early 20s, yeah.
And you hadn't been speaking Afrikaans at all?
No. I mean, you do speak Afrikaans.
But not really, just a few words.
Yes, you do speak Afrikaans because you have Afrikaans as one language in the class, but not to be enforced on other important subjects like arithmetic and mathematics and geography and all that, and history. And it became very, very difficult. It was an uphill. So as young students, we mobilized ourselves all over the country and stood up against the apartheid Bantu education. This education system that was meant for, and the Africans, was called Bantu education. It's education for Abantu, and which is the Bantus, and us. And it had to be that inferior. So we stood up. And when we tried to do that in my college, then few of us were actually expelled. I was amongst those that were expelled myself. So I kissed bye-bye to my career of being a land surveyor. And then I went away and started to do some little bit there with my little knowledge of land surveying, and from there I ended up being a medical technology assistant in a hospital, working in the laboratory, and they wanted to train me to become a specialized medical technologist. And I said, at the end of the year, when we're supposed to be taken to the training center, I said, no, unfortunately. And a very good man who was a senior medical and technologist, Mr. Van der Linden, persuaded me, said that, man, I'm old, and I thought that you are going to take over, and please go to Edendale for training, and which was a college in Durban.
Wait, is this professor, was he a black, was he African?
He was white.
White, okay.
Not every white person, not every white person was for apartheid. It is important for us to note, because even within the ANC, we had white people. We had white people that were incarcerated, we had white people that were sent to the gallows, we had white people that were, you know, struggling with us. And but because they realized that this system is very, very barbaric. And so Mr. Van der Linden tried and explained to me, you will definitely be a very good one. I can see the way you're working with the pipettes and what have you, all the instruments in the... I said, no. He said, tell me why. I said, the life is too quiet here in the land. I'm not meant for this life. Then I said, the little money that I have, I'm going to the university. Lance, I did not tell my parents that I've been kicked out of the college.
They did not know?
No. Because my father was working in the factory at Volkswagen motor manufacturing company, and he was boasting there. He was boasting and telling people, hey, I'm having a son that is going to become a land surveyor. And so he's very happy. He's going to have a learned son. And in my language, in the Xhosa language, a land surveyor is called unocanda, the one who actually divide lands and so on. Unocanda. So he was boasting as he was working there, and people were respecting him because his son is going to become a land surveyor, which was a rare profession amongst black people. And it was not to be when I was expelled. And now I was afraid. I didn't want to go home and tell my mother. My mother and my father. I went over to another area, to East London area, and I stayed there with my cousins. And I looked for a job in that area. That's where I got the job at the hospital, Cecilia Makiwan Hospital, the biggest hospital of the area. So I tried my luck. And then after collecting a few cents, I applied at the University of Fort Hare, the first black university in the Southern Africa, where Nelson Mandela and many others, Oliver Tambo, Robert Mugabe, and they studied. I went to that university, registered in Commerce Department. I wanted to become an economist.
You changed to economist?
Completely.
Why? What made you
everything now I was starting to be, you know, clever.
Okay.
And say that, okay, this thing, oppression and exploitation, is about the economy. It's about the management of the economy. The whole political situation in the country is about discrimination. Everything in apartheid is about the control of the economy and the resources of the country. And therefore I must know something about this. I must intensify my knowledge in this. So that's why I veered to commerce. Guess what happened?
What happened?
And unfortunately Steve Biko dies.
That's right. Steve Biko, he didn't die, he was killed, yes.
Yeah, dies, killed. All of us were taken to prison. And
they picked up everyone.
Everyone at the university. And luckily, we stayed there, and we had very, very strong lawyers that actually mobilized everything and were taken in the court and were released, all of us.
How long were you there?
And no, it was a limited time. I think we must have stayed for few weeks or months. Yeah, or a month, somewhere there. Now we came back to school at the university, continued. Again, 1980, when I was at the final year with my commerce, national boycott, release Nelson Mandela campaign. nationally. People are fed up. Been receiving messages from our leaders in exile, Oliver Tambo and others, up the tempo on the struggle for liberation to break the chains of oppression, and therefore take the apartheid into the doorsteps of the very people that have created it, so that they can see the pain that you are suffering. You as students, you had to be up there. So we upped the tempo and strongly released Nelson Mandela campaign and unban the African National Congress and unban and the many leaders that were banned and that were in leaders who were in house arrest. Liberate the country. Let's have a non-racial South Africa. And the rights of the workers and everything. It was a real struggle now.
Right.
Struggle. And I was actually getting excited, and many of us were getting excited that now we're in the thing now. Now, because now we understand. And we're starting now to read, listening to Martin Luther King.
Because the Civil Rights Act was right.
Absolutely.
Oh,
and a lot.
Right.
And a lot from US. Revolutionaries and revolutionaries from Latin America, revolutionaries from all over. Fidel Castro and the Cuban revolutions, the Soviet revolutions. And now we're getting to understand, okay, who is supporting us in the world, our struggle? Who are our friends? Then we got to know that Soviet was contributing because our people who are in exile, led by Oliver Tambo, were trained in various countries of the world. Within the continent of Africa, countries like Zambia, Tanzania, Ethiopia, and so on and so forth. And some of the countries just next door were getting destabilized because the apartheid government was desperate now, because these countries were anti the system of apartheid until such time eventually apartheid or South African government was regarded as a pariah state by the countries participating at the UN. In that 1980, we led the struggle at the university and had the university meetings, all black universities in Durban and in KwaZulu-Natal. We sat down and worked out a strategy to actually lift up the protests. And unfortunately, the University of Fort Hare, when others actually took a decision, no, now a protest is more like a punching bag. Mm-hmm. And therefore, you don't punch the bag until you die. You punch the bag, you move out. You punch the bag in boxing, and you move out. You do the shuffling around and move in. You don't just stand and punch and punch and punch. So we said, at Fort Hare, we agree it is a right tactic, but at the same time, there's a point where you must put up a very strong statement that enough is enough. So we continued with the boycott. And the university was closed, and many of us were sent home. And many were recalled to come back, and few were not called to come back, and I was amongst those people. And I was at the final year of my BCom degree, and I wanted to be very proud to tell my father. At that time, I had already told my father, now I am going to work at the bank, Dad.
Right.
He says, really? I said, now I am going to be a banker because I'm studying commerce. You can imagine in those days, people respected the banks, they loved the banks because that's where the money is kept. To have your son standing on the other side wearing tie and suit, counting monies and doing everything for people as a banker, it's a very, very big privilege, and for any parent. But it was not to be because I was chased out, And then that was the end of it. Then, but luckily, at that time, the Barclays Bank was starting to recruit the final year students. And I was amongst those that were recruited by the Barclays Bank, chosen to be an executive trainee. For the first time, the banks were beginning to transform and getting black people to be in the executive. And I was chosen to be amongst those. But here am I, not finishing my degree. And that was the end of it. But the bank said, because we looked at your results and everything, we're still interested in you, but now we want you to start as a teller.
A tailor?
Teller when it's at the bank.
Oh, teller, okay. Teller in the bank, okay, yes.
Yeah, counting
yes.
money and serving people. So I said, no, it's fine, because I'm looking for a job. So I became a teller at Barclays Bank, and from there I, again, the birth of the new, after the banning of the ANC, and the people of South Africa decided to come up with a new organization, umbrella organization of all different formations, churches, sports, everybody, civil organizations, and came together to form what was referred to as a United Democratic Front, UDF. You would remember people like Alan Busak and people like Bishop Tutu and others at the time, very strong, and Beas Nodier and others in the forefront. So UDF was born, and it was an interesting period.
Did you join that?
I was part of it.
You were part of it.
Active. I was not only part, I was a leader.
From the initial.
Yes,
the part.
I was there from the beginning.
So at that time, you must have been, you were still in your 20s.
At that time, I was in the 30s somewhere.
Oh,
there.
30s?
Yeah, I think
30s then?
late 20s, 30s, yes.
Okay. Right.
Then the bank said to me, I was working at the bank as a teller. The unfortunate thing, we take a decision to say that boycott. People must not buy in town, in the shops. People must go back and buy in the locations where they stay, in the small shops there, general dealers of the black people, so that we make the economy to feel. Those who take the decision to support the system, they must feel it. And what happens as a leader of UDF? You are at the bank, you are counting money of people and the companies who are banking the bank. And at the same time as a leader, you go out during lunchtime, you monitor that people must not buy. What a contradiction.
That's right.
So the security system were actually monitoring us as well. And now and again, I would be taken in. And the bank said, man, now and again you get arrested and detained for monitoring the boycott and what have you. Man, please, man, stop this, because we need you at the bank. You're a good guy here and so on in your work. Warning, I continued. But at the end, and they came back again because I didn't stop. And they sent me a letter from headquarters saying that you have to take a choice now, whether you are working for the bank as teller number one, who is responsible even for ordering money from the Reserve Bank, or you go in the streets permanently and do what you're doing. I said, there's no choice. I'm going in the streets. So that's how I left the bank.
Were you married at this time?
At that time, I was not yet married.
So you had
no, I was married at that time, sorry. Okay. I was married at that time.
And had kids?
No.
No kids, okay.
No kids at the time.
Right.
We just started and our marriage. Yes, started our marriage at the time. Then I continued as an activist and unemployed until the churches, the South African Council of Churches, under the World Council of Churches, employed me at the regional level, the Border Council of Churches. The border region was the region where I was operating as an activist. I was employed as now to be responsible for community development. Beautiful, wonderful responsibility, because now I was interacting with people. That's the life that I wanted. Went out and setting projects with people, because sewing projects, gardening projects, making people to be self-sufficient, starting to read the documents about self-sufficiency and all that, and looking at various models of cooperatives all over the world, the Mondragon and the experiment of the Spain, which is one of the successful examples of cooperatives, trying to introduce this amongst the people so that people begin to come together, because it tallies with Ubuntu. I am because you are.
Oh, right.
You start to do things, start to sue things, and don't go to sales house and so on and buy the uniforms, which is a big company. You can actually do these uniforms in your own village. Buy a few machines and you get the old ladies to actually do, and they actually do that. They do their community gardens and they harvest, they sell the surplus in town and sell amongst themselves. That was the idea. The churches, role of the churches in the struggle. They saved many of us, and who could not get employment, and because once you are in the list, it's difficult for you to be employed anywhere. And so that's what happened. That was the life. Then come 1994.
But it wasn't in 1990 that apartheid stopped?
Yes.
That's when it's so much pressure from outside,
Outside
and
and inside, everywhere.
The U.S. had a boycott.
Yes.
You know, they tried to do it other ways, but they were quiet. The U.S. was quiet about it at first. They didn't want to say anything at the
initially.
beginning.
Yes.
And many people did. Some of the other countries as well. But after it came up to a groundswell, and the white South Africans couldn't take it anymore.
Absolutely. And if you remember, during former U.S. President Ronald Reagan,
right, when
came up with the constructive engagement policy, if I remember, and where now, much as we differ with you, South Africa in this apartheid, but we don't want to talk about it. Please try and to come up with reforms. But we're not taking any strong decision against you because you're our friends.
That's right.
And
against communism, they thought.
Absolutely.
Right.
That was the issue. Against communism. That was the issue.
That was the issue. But once
because we are helped by Soviet.
Right.
Now, and we're calling for assistance from everybody instead of just upping the budget and upping whatever assistance given to us by these others. They say, no, these are communists.
That's right.
These are terrorists.
That's right.
Because they get help from there, they get help from China, and they are close with the Cubans.
Right.
And Ronald Reagan came up, and later on, the anti-apartheid policy or act in the U.S., which started now to lift up and sanctions from U.S. against South Africa.
That's right. When that happened,
now, that was the last straw of the South African government. And these are very big players. It was very clear now there was no option left.
Right.
And for the South African government at the time, the apartheid government, and safe to say, and we are ready to talk. Then we had Visionaries. And Nelson Mandela in prison was putting up strong positions because they were begging a person to be released, and the person says, no, I don't want to be released.
Making
very interesting.
More pressure.
Absolutely. No.
I'm staying here.
You said you want to keep me for life, so I want to stay here for life. Not unless.
Right.
Not unless A, B, C, D.
Right.
Oliver Tambo outside is mobilizing the world, and headquarters in Lusaka, and they decide, okay, there's environment now in the world and in South Africa, because big players in business, intellectuals, went over and outside the country to start talking with the leaders that were regarded as terrorists. Right. Everybody's shocked in the country. What? They met with the ANC, with Oliver Tambo, with Alfred Nzo, Thabo Mbeki, and many others, sat down and discussed. Came out in the biggest tabloid in the country, the Sunday Times. Yeah, these guys, and they're sitting and discussing in one room, and they discover no one is having horns or tail. We are all human beings. And all of us are totally, totally committed and loyal to our country. True patriots. Both sides. And they came back in the country. They said, no, this must come to an end. Those guys are actually, we need them now, actually, because one, intellectually, they are very strong. Two, they have so much experience. And three, they can actually lead this country. We must be prepared.
The people would follow them, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right, they believed in them.
Then the government started. And
yes,
of course, there was a resistance.
That's right.
B.W. Botha, at the time, who was the president, resisted. And of course, and F.W. de Klerk mobilized, released Nelson Mandela.
Right.
Started the process of negotiations. Various stages leading to that.
To the end of apartheid, right.
Until, and then negotiations started. Called on all different organizations that were involved in the process of struggle. Let's sit around the table and talk about the future of our country. Creating a non-racial and non-sexist, prosperous, democratic South Africa. Mm-hmm. And
but I think South Africa is the only country in history that we know of that's actually been able to get through that and forgive and no violence.
Absolutely.
No one's been able to do that, because usually it's after a lot of, well, there was a lot of blood, but
yeah,
not at the moment of giving up.
Absolutely.
And that was unique. That was
it was definitely unique because, and I give credit myself to the leaders.
Very smart decision.
I give credit to the leaders, Lance, and because don't think that, Lance, it was easy for the leaders as well, because they were hotheads.
Look at
people like me and many others of my generation were saying, but how can we sit around the table? What about and so-and-so? What about so-and-so? What about the massacres?
Yes.
What about this? What about that?
Yes, yes.
Leadership of Oliver Tambo, Nelson Mandela stood firm.
They did.
This is the direction we're taking, negotiations. Who is coming from outside? Not one from outside. All South Africans around the table negotiated for the new South Africa, a democratic South Africa, non-racial, where people shall live together in peace, respecting the diversity, the cultures, the language, the cuisine, the attire, the dances, everything.
That's right.
Together as one. And Nelson Mandela, during his inauguration, never and never again should we tolerate discrimination of one people on the basis of the color of the skin, and never again that we should actually promote discrimination of any form. South Africans are very, very sensitive on such things until to date. We may quibble, of course, currently, and then from there, new structures were set up for unification of the country and various symbols. The flag that we have, which is a flag which depicts the rainbow nation at peace with itself, and that is my country that I represent here, South Africa, as a diplomat. Now, you can see rugby. Nelson Mandela, here Nelson Mandela get into the stadium, is wearing the green and gold jersey with a cap, standing with his captain. Number 6 right. At the back, and the captain is number 6. He went to them before the match and said, you have to win this match, guys.
And they did.
We need this match for the country. It's not only for the cup and for the World Cup. We need it for the country.
To win the cup. That was amazing.
And playing against what team?
Wait.
All Blacks.
All Blacks, that's right.
At that time.
All Blacks, right. With the,
at that time.
that's right.
Very strong.
New Zealand was no joke.
Invincible.
That's right.
With one of the best wings in history, John Alomu, a very fit guy. He was just trouncing on every opponent. But to Springboks, South Africans, they were all over him until the last moment. The draw, the match is a draw until extra time, and one fellow, young flyer, Joel Stransky. Papa, it's a drop goal. Over 3 points ahead. The referee, prip, prip.
Boom, game over.
Everybody in the streets of South Africa, Lance.
I'm sure.
It was madness. It was people took off their, people were just having their beers, people were having their braai or barbecue, you call it.
Right.
It was just exciting.
Where were you? Where were you at that time? Where were you?
I was at home at that time. I was in Johannesburg.
Okay.
And everybody. No, I was not in Johannesburg.
Okay,
I was in East London at the time.
East London.
East London.
Watching the game.
Watching the game with friends, all of us excited, families. We can't believe. Black and white in the streets of South Africa.
Hugging and
Hugging,
just feeling as one.
Nation building needs visionaries. It needs people that can listen. It needs people with resilience on what they want, on the dream given to them by the very people, listening to these people and loving them, Lance. Because you can't lead people if you don't love them.
That's true.
There must be passion. Nelson Mandela had that. You could see it oozing out of his eyes, and the love and passion when he sees somebody, irrespective of the color. It's worse when he sees the future, the lifeblood, children. That's why, until the end, he said, the little that I have, and he moved up and down and set up a committee. They must put up a hospital for children. That was Nelson Mandela. Then you had the unfortunate and the genius and of our struggle, Oliver Tambo, very extremely bright international diplomat who mobilized the world. And he's actually one of the people that we emulate as a diplomat. Very good in negotiations and speaking in a very easy way, persuasively, and advocating for his country and for his people, moving all over the world, convincing until the United Nations accepted that what is happening in South Africa is barbaric. Oliver Tambo, and when he came back after the unbanning of the ANC, unfortunately was not well.
That's right.
He had stroke. But he was there
Still there, yes.
until
the end, yes.
Until the end.
That's beautiful.
Brought back the sons and daughters that were in exile, all of them. And in the culture, in the military, schools, and the trainees, activists in the various countries came back with Oliver Tambo, led by him.
That's beautiful.
Nelson Mandela opened the doors of prison. Inside the country, everybody ready to accept and listen. And we had to sit down now and listen. The real leaders are back. The leaders of the people are back.
That's right.
And the crafting of the country, its constitution, the constitution that we have, even until today.
The same one.
One of the best judges in U.S., Madame Ginsburg, may her soul rest in peace, I think so.
I think so too.
And said, when she was asked about the country where we need to draw lessons from in terms of the constitution, and he said, South Africa. Let's look at that constitution of that country. I was shocked. Myself, U.S. judge saying about an African country that we managed to come up with a constitution that can be emulated by countries like U.S., highly developed countries, very sophisticated. The paper that we put together by our leaders and us at the time, because I was in the National Executive Committee of the ANC myself. Not only at that, I was also in the Working Committee of the ANC, spokesperson of the ANC
so you
as
were there,
well.
yes.
So I was there, part of the negotiations, listening to our leaders, prepared to be led, listening to the people on the ground, because during that negotiations, you had to go back to the people in the villages, in the townships, and say, this is the position that we're taking on the land, this is the position that we're taking on the economy, the position that we're taking with regard to women, and so on. And people say, no, change that, put this clause, and introduce this, what about this? The workers, no. We want this clause, change that one to this, from the people. That's why that constitution is like that.
That's what worked, yes. You got the majority.
Absolutely, and it was accepted. We had a country that we have today.
That is beautiful.
Loving that country and loving its people.
Ambassador, I want to thank you so much. Before I end the podcast, there's a question I'd like to ask everyone. If you could magically go back in time and meet the younger Ngonyama,
yes, sir,
and give him advice based upon what you know now, how old would he be, and what advice would you give him?
I would actually say to him that make sure that you listen all the time.
How old is he when you're talking to him?
I'm talking to him at that age, maybe about 20, in the 20s. Please, Lulama, listen, learn, remain humble, and instill love for people. Because it is that love, it is that humility that will make you a better human being. It is that compassion that will instill resilience against anything that is wrong in protection of your country. It is that compassion that will make you to be a strong and good diplomat that does not misrepresent your country, that listens and represents your country with earnest. That would be my advice to that chap. And maybe that chap will have his own ideas as well, but that will be my humble advice to him.
I believe you actually went back in time and gave it to him, because that's what you are. Thank you so much, Ambassador. I really appreciate it so much. I want to thank all of you for watching this podcast. Make sure you press like and subscribe. And never forget, it's all unknown, so continue to reach for the stars.
Because you are too blessed to be stressed.